In this day in history, very important day, the first airing of the very first episode of Transformers Victory, one of my favorite Transformer series and a personal favorite of a lot of people in the Transformer fandom. It's one of those series that you've seen it or you haven't seen it. What I mean by that is for the people who have seen it, they enjoy it. For the people that haven't seen it, they know it exists and they understand why it's popular because it had a lot of really interesting designs and everything.
Hmm.
Transformers Victory was a series that a lot of people was a return to form because the series prior to that, which was Transformers Master Force, it Master Force was a huge departure from what Transformers was doing. Transformers had that ongoing story up into Headmasters. Master Force was a departure from that, going with human designs, going with a very human based story. And a lot of really cool things were going on in Master Force. When they went into Victory, they went with a lot of different choices aesthetically in that they wanted to do that. There's a lot of gimmicks going on with each individual character in the show. Combining was a big thing too. Long before Combiner Wars, where everyone combined, Transformers Victory kind of ran with that, where everyone had some kind of combining with someone else gimmick, and this also like even predates say Super Link and Energon. And most importantly, it was the first time they truly took a risk and decided to not only have a series that didn't have an Optimus Prime in it or an Optimus Prime looking leader, but also a character that didn't have a convoy in it per se, where you could have a Rodimus, but he still was a convoy and Optimus Prime still showed up. Headmasters had Rodimus in it, it had Optimus Prime in it. Sure, they both, disappeared later in the series, but they still were there. Master Force, it didn't have Optimus Prime, it didn't have a convoy, but it had God Ginrai, which more or less looked like Optimus Prime.
Yeah, pretty
This
much.
was this was a different take. It was not a Megatron, it wasn't a Galvatron. They had a Death Source, which was a different character. It was a completely different series, and a lot of people say it also was the prototype to what would be how Brave series are done today, how a lot of mecha series for children for Transformers are done today.
Ah.
Even Gal Geiger, a lot of its
Okay.
inspiration comes from Transformers Victory. And Transformers Victory itself even found a lot of inspiration from not Transformers, Gundam Double Zeta, which was doing very well in 1986 and 1987 at the time when they were producing Transformers Victory. Double Zeta was very popular, and if you look at G1 Star Saber and you look at the Double Zeta Gundam, specifically like the full armored one, you see a lot of similarities there. There's just a lot of like that kind. They wanted that big, bad ass looking, faceplate, flight, jet kind of transforming leader that was noble and everything. And again, really returning back to form with an Optimus Prime like character, but even better in a lot of ways because a lot of people love Star Saber because he's kind of one of those Transformer characters that we feel like just like in Dragon Ball, how characters got stronger and stronger and stronger. We felt like this is the peak of an Autobot leader in terms of like the strongest Autobot leader. Like who's stronger than this guy? Like it just kept gradually getting stronger and stronger. So this series was incredible, and it had a lot of stuff going on for it. A lot of the designs were incredible. There's just this very like anyone who watches the Brave series there's such a brave feel to it that you end up knowing where it all came from after watching this. And it wrote the formula that would continuously be used afterwards for Transformers car robots, also known as
Hmm.
robots in the skies, which
You
would be
agree?
used for Armada, Cybertron, even Superlink. There was a certain formula that was written that was created with Transformers Victory, and mildly so with Master Force, but more so with Victory, that would be used also with all the Brave series, X Kaiser, and even going into Gal Geiger, like the whole Brave lineage, which is you have the main leader character. He has his three, like, I always use the parallel of Victory to car robots, also known as the first robots in the skies, which is you have the main leader,
Hmm.
which has three brothers working under him. So the Carr brothers, or the Breast Masters, and the Brain Masters in this case,
Right.
and they're fighting against the main villain, who has an idiot team of animals working under them. So the Dino King, or the Gas Skunk and Gel Shark and all of them.
Yeah.
And then as time progresses, an elite team of villains join the bad guy team. In the case of Car Robots, it was Scourge with Valdegus and all of them. In the
Oh
case
yeah.
of Transformers Victory, it was Lio Kaiser and the crew. And there's so much different spins on different character archetypes. They have two different kinds of Starscream characters that are handled in two different kinds of ways. It's like they took Starscream and they separated him in half, where one is, I want to take over leadership, but I know my place, as opposed to, I want to take over leadership and I'm a coward and traitor.
Right.
Like there was two separate characters that were like that in Lyozak and Hellbat. There's a lot of death in this series. The death count with Transformers Victory is considerably more. The battles for you watch this series in 1989, you go, wow, the animation was very good. Specifically, anything that involves Star Saber with his sword, they did really good sword fights. The very last battle, even in the series, I don't want to spoil, but the last battle is very well choreographed, and the stakes are high. Very good series. And again, the whole emphasis on combining. Star Saber is a combiner in a sense. Number one, from a Power Master gimmick kind of standpoint, but he also is a Breast Master. Excuse me, a Brain Master, which in a sense is its own kind of combiner. And then he's also a combiner with, later on in the series, he gets his upgrade
Right.
uh, in another character, which again, for the few people who haven't watched, I'll leave it to them to watch. Even with
Thank you.
even with even with the other characters in the series, Road Caesar, also known as the other Brain Masters, they combine. When you have the Dino King members, they all combine. Lyozak and his crew with Lio Kaiser, they all combine. We get pretty much the prototype to what would be the Superlink or Energon gimmick with the crew of Landcross, where they all have like this gimmick too, where they all could combine, but they could also combine with each other individually and make all these different combinations. Like there was a lot of stuff going on there, and the play patterns with Transformer Victory toys is immense. The only thing that really, us as Americans, that we got from Transformers Victory, the only scant amounts of it was Micromasters. Micromasters
True.
was a big thing with Transformers Victory, where we learned about Planet Micro and all of that stuff, and where all the Micromasters came from. But that was the only thing really from Transformers Victory that we got released over here. If you then want to also count, because we had the Monster Bots, but they were repainted and retooled and given new Pretender shells, and they were monsters. Where in Japan they had them as the Dino King members. But everything else was really unique to Transformers Victory, and a lot of those toys still to this day command high ticket numbers, because a
Right.
lot of the Master Force toys, you could watch Master Force and enjoy it, but a lot of those toys also got released in America. A lot of those Pretender shells, yeah, sure, we didn't get Metal Hawk, sure, we didn't get the back half of the God Ginrai combination with God Bomber, although we did get a reissue years later in America. But a lot of that stuff we did get in general. Most of those Pretender shells, most of those other gimmicky characters, even Piranacon, which was a major villain with the Seacons in Master Force. We got all of that stuff, so
Which
you
is
could
pretty
collect.
interesting. Like in retrospect, it's really interesting where it's like we can still bring over those toys. We just don't have to tell anybody about it,
Yeah, well,
or we'll let them show up in the comic book and
well,
not
that's
really.
what the Marvel books were for. I think the Marvel books
I
really,
I think that's really fast. Like
and that's
that's surprising,
that's a
don't you
credit
think?
to both Simon Furman and Bob Bugansky, where here's this series that we got the toys, but we don't have the fiction accompanied with it. So we're going to do our own
In
thing.
animated form at
Yeah,
that, you know.
and we're going to do our own thing with the printed media with Marvel, and do their own spin. I mean, look at the best case is Minerva.
Yeah.
Minerva was one kind of character in Japan, and they turned her into Nightbeat over here.
Mm.
They repainted it into Nightbeat, and then Nightbeat really became his own standalone character in the Marvel comics, where he's a detective and became a fan favorite for a lot of people. where it's like you don't even know. Some people to this day sometimes question, did Nightbeat come first and Minerva was created afterwards, or the other way around? Like
Right.
we're not even sure really to this day, that we don't have like the ironclad confirmation of that. But there was just a lot of stuff going on with Transformers Victory. And I mean, if you were a Canadian, some of those molds were used in European releases, and they showed up in Canada. So you were able to kind of get the Brain Masters of Road Caesar, just painted in different color schemes and released in Europe without the combiner pieces.
Hmm.
But in general, like again, a lot of those molds we never got. And even to this day, to get those molds today, a lot of them are very pricey. A complete Road Caesar will run you between $500 and $800
Hmm.
with the box. A complete Star Saber will run you between $300 and $400. A complete
We
Victory.
got to see a friend of ours actually buy some of those, right? I think, if I remember right,
Yeah,
one
well,
BotCon.
we'll give a shout out to Tony. Tony, I think it was the very last BotCon. Tony
Yeah.
bought a whole bunch of Dino King members and stuff, and he spent quite a pretty penny. Um, Mostly because again, those are it's a short line to collect, which is a good thing. There's not a lot in that line, so it's very easy to complete it. But every single figure is expensive
Yeah.
because they're unique in that there's no other way to get them. Even something like Overlord, like Overlord was a unique mold to Master Force, but you were still able to get him through the UK release, which
Yeah.
is slightly different, darker purple. There's very very little changes between one or the other, but there still was other ways to get your hands on that mold at least, even if it wasn't the same color. Master Force had a lot of that, where it's like, oh, if you didn't get this, then you had other options. But Victory, that wasn't the case. There was no other way to get Star Saber outside of a
Right.
bootleg, maybe. But it's the really good stuff, and I mean, there's a reason why Star Saber got a masterpiece release. In that sea of 84, 85, 86 characters, why did Star Saber get chosen to get a masterpiece release with all those other characters? He doesn't fit in from a timeline perspective because he was just that popular in Japan, and why the homages to him would keep coming up. And in the Super Link series, there was a character called Wing Saber that's the spitting image of Star Saber. Obviously, not the same character, but just it handled visually in that way.
Didn't Star Saber's masterpiece get the add-on as well?
No, it never got
Okay,
a
my bad.
combiner. It was actually designed that if you
Mm.
wanted to, you could use the old Victory Leo to combine with it.
Ah, okay,
So you
okay.
can use the old Victory Leo, but at the same time, there is a third party one kicking around also.
Because I remember I thought I saw an image of it combining with something, and I was
There
like,
was a third party one.
okay,
There
my
was a
bad.
third party one that actually makes the figure quite massive, like
I
pretty
could
huge,
imagine.
and it's pretty impressive looking with the third party one. I'll give it credit to the third party one. Like it gives it this gorgeous huge wings, and
Mm.
it's that like let's say like Titan scale Devastator kind of like display figure where it's just like
Yeah.
that's a conversation piece. It's so big because it's easily the Star Saber one. Straight up, just the masterpiece Star Saber is easily the largest masterpiece toy of the movie of the G1 masterpiece line thus far.
Yeah.
Up to that
Just
point,
looking at the box right now.
yeah, up to that point, like it was, Megatron and MPO1 Optimus were kind of head and head. I think Megatron's slightly taller because of the barrel, but
Hmm.
then Star Saber just came around and just was more massive than all of them and had a lot more gimmicks. And great, by the way, great masterpiece toy. Anyone that could go out of their way to pick it up, if you're a fan of,
MP24.
yeah, flawless. What a great masterpiece toy. And I mean, those toys, those original toys, not cheap to get, which created a mystique around them. A lot of people who enjoy Transformers Victory, they don't get to enjoy the toys, and but that's where like even third party stepped in. And then recently we got our Road Caesar with the
How long into knowing you did you get your Star Saber, your OG Star Saber from eBay?
the
Like
story that the story that
I
Jaws D Wendell's referring to is this
I don't think I knew you
was, if I had
that
to
long.
pinpoint it, it was 1998. Keep in mind, 1998. This was like when eBay first was coming onto the scene in a very public way. The internet wasn't a well-known thing. Only a few people had the internet. Um,
I
I
think this
did
was like end of summer, fallish, because I remember it was very sunny still.
well, I remember I still had my school uniform on.
Yeah, exactly.
Because the photos that are kicking around, which I'll go into explanation. I worked a summer job. Made a nice wad of cash doing a summer job, and first thing I did was I put my sights on eBay, and here's Proto Man circa 1998 in this burgeoning eBay world, going, I got to get me a Star Saber. And imagine I'm saying I got to get me a Star Saber back in 1998, which I was very lucky to do so because back then, guys were trying to complete their '84 G1 collection.
Yeah.
I got to get me that Jazz and Prowl. A lot of people were in that frame of mind where I was seeing a complete G1 Jazz go for like $300, which is crazy when you think about that today.
Hmm.
But back then that was a reality. And then here's a mint in box G1 Star Saber for $150, and no one knows who he is and or cares.
Yeah.
And so I jumped on a $150 Star Saber. It came in the mail. Wendell was over when it came in the mail, and I was just the happiest guy in the world. And we
And
had
I think it was like it wasn't that long into knowing you. It really
uh,
wasn't. I don't think so.
maybe like 3 years, 2 years, 3 years, something like that.
Maybe a little bit like less than that because I had just started high school.
Yeah, something like that probably.
And it was just like, oh, cool, this guy has a collection,
And again,
and
we're
his
talking.
collection was much smaller than it was now, but it was like, oh, cool, that's pretty cool. And then this box in the mail comes, Japanese writing on it, what, and you pull out, oh, and you're freaking out, and your family's taking pictures. And
Yeah,
I'm like,
my family even took photos because it was such a big deal to me. Because I was because it was, to me, it was like this was my first ever mint in box Japanese exclusive Transformer.
right,
Again, you have to understand, 1998, we were like into season 2 of Beast Wars. Like
exactly,
the climate was a very different time back then. Like if you were even talking Japanese exclusives from a Beast Wars standpoint, you were hoping to get maybe Shadow Panther. You know, I think like in a
and that
couple of
character didn't even come up yet.
no, well,
Shadow Panther.
well, because Shadow Panther, just the Cheetor repaint,
Oh,
not the
okay, okay.
Ravage
Excuse
one,
me,
just the
excuse me.
straight up Cheetor one. They did a Shadow Panther repaint in Japan, and I think we were still a couple of months away from Beast Wars Second being a thing. So
Right,
there
right.
wasn't a lot of like and the knowledge of what existed back then of Transformers was so much smaller. So getting start like I discovered Transformers Victory. I'll give a shout out to all the old OGs of the fandom. There was a old Transformer fan called Rockman666. I don't even know if his website still exists. And Rockman666 used to post full episodes in really low quality on Real Player of Transformers Victory and Transformers Master Force. And he put the one Transformers Zone episode on there too. And I used to just watch these completely unsubtitled and watch them all and eat them up. You didn't need to be you didn't need to know Japanese to know what was going down. And this was just the most amazing stuff ever. And I was like, I got to get that Star Saber figure. I got like just the Brain Master gimmick blew my mind. So you put it in the chest and you close the chest and it becomes the face. Oh, like this is way more than
Yeah.
a headmaster. You know, so I was very lucky. A lot of the Transformers that I got that today are so pricey, I was lucky because I collected them when no one cared. When they were,
Mm.
they were trying again. They were trying to get their G1 Jazzes and when I got to get a complete Devastator was a big deal back then. The early days of the internet. Such a different climate today, but back then. So again, this is a long-winded rant about Transformers Victory, but it's a great it's a great series.
A celebration, not a rant. A
It is
celebration.
March 14th, all the way back in 1989 was when it made its debut. And this series would run solidly strong for 38 episodes. And it had a manga series. It rewrote a lot of things, not just for Transformers, but for how mecha storytelling would be done. And it was so successful that the writing was on the wall for Takara for the future when it came to doing robot series and all that stuff. And I mean, we again,
I was gonna ask real quick. Do you see them maybe redoing the box set they did through Shout Factory, or like maybe Hasbro taking the reins on it and saying like, no, you have to put in this, put in
Shout
this proper
Factory,
name.
Shout Factory. I
Like and the reason I'm asking is like because like how they did the anniversary for the movie anniversary on Blu-ray, where they like really like okay, we're gonna
The
clean
thing
this
is
up
with
and do
Shout
this better.
Factory, and I guess I could talk about it now, which was when they were first working on those box sets. Me and Monzo were kind of in talks with Shout Factory from a subtitle standpoint and extras and stuff like that, because the producer of Shout Factory, which I won't say his name, but the producer of Shout Factory really wanted to go about making these box sets on the cheap.
Hmm.
So anything that they could put as extras on the DVDs, that could be
I guess you would
used.
you would have to pay licensing on, I would assume,
Well, he
perhaps.
didn't want to use anything that would have to involve, even like I was sending him commercials for the toys, right?
Right,
And if any time one of those commercials featured a kid, that means that commercial has to go through a guy in Shout Factory to block out the face. But then
right.
he'd have to pay that guy. So it was really like a lot of stuff couldn't be used. I was even suggesting stuff like, well, we could do a jukebox, which was something that I got inspiration from another DVD box set that I bought, where why don't we just use the background music and have it that could be an extra on the DVD? You could just listen to the background music.
Yeah.
That was something that I got from, there's a old show called Galaxy Rangers.
Mm.
And their box set had the same idea, where they had a lot of good vocal music, so they had one section where you could just listen to the music. And I gave him that idea, but then he's like, oh, we might have to pay the licensing then on that. So there was a lot of hoops that it had to go through. I'll be honest with you, ultimately in the end, it wasn't a good final product. I was not satisfied with how that final product turned out.
Hmm.
If you do want to watch Transformers Victory, uh, Wolfpack Productions and TV-Nihon, which they worked together. I think it's under TV-Nihon now, TVN. They did their own fan subs of it, with Lone Gamer, Hydra helped a little bit with it also. That's the definitive subtitled version, in my opinion. A lot of stuff that might have been lost in translation
Hmm.
is explained and is present there too. So they did a really good job. So I would suggest, if you want to watch Transformers Victory, um, try to download that. I know it seems like you're taking money out of the hands of Shout Factory, but I really feel that you're not watching the product properly if you're watching it through the Shout Factory subtitles. It wasn't there. They didn't even want to use they're called ASS. They're called ASS files, which are
Hmm.
that's what they're called, which are subtitle files. They didn't use ours. We provided them and they weren't used. So yeah, and even Monzo wanted to provide the scripts for the dub versions, which were done by Star TV and everything. None of that stuff got used in the end, and I mean, I'm not a big fan of the way Shout Factory handled the Japanese stuff. It wasn't done um, as well as the way the fan subs for Headmasters, Master Force, and Victory were done. Zone has a subtitled version kicking around, but that one was done by other groups, and that one's also pretty good. So personally, as much as I don't want to like encourage going out and downloading something illegally, but that's the best version. It's kind of like how with Star Wars, like up to a certain point, the best way to enjoy the original trilogy was a fan cut that they put out there.
Oh yeah, the HD fan cut.
Yeah,
That's
so it's kind
unedited.
of the same thing. It's like, yeah, you could go out and buy the movie, but there's a way better way to experience it that was done with the love and care of the fans. And it's the same thing with the Takara trilogy, as I like to call it. So that's the best way. TV Nihon, Transformers Victory, that's how I would download it. It's kicking around out there. I'm pretty sure there's a torrent somewhere. But yeah, great stuff, great series, great designs. Even the manga of the series was kind of its own thing. It was its own spin off with its own way of telling the story. Just great stuff. Deathsaurus, probably one of the most badass Decepticon leaders of all time, just didn't give an F about anybody. Very Beast Wars Megatron in writing. Just everything great about that series. And again, not trying to be another Optimus Prime versus Megatron series that we're so used to today. So I love Transformers Victory. Check it out.